Welcome to wasmCloud Wednesday for Wednesday, March the 16th. We've got a fun meeting today. We've got some new members. Evan, do you want to start with an introduction?
Yeah, hi, I am Evan Matiza. I'm a client manager in data engineering with the company Nielsen IQ. We're a good old split off in Nielsen, and we measure retail shopper behavior, right? So we're a market intelligence company. Part of what we do is I have a little app dev team that I work with. And one of the things that we take advantage of are remote developer environments. We pride ourselves on people being able to onboard quickly. And so one of the things that I've gotten to learn is an application called Gitpod that's available. So it's gitpod.io. You can go to the website, and it's a very similar experience to what's being developed in the space in terms of GitHub code spaces or StackBlitz or any of the others that are out there. But it's a little more heavyweight. You're actually getting a container with some decent cores on it and some decent RAM, and you can actually do quite a bit of development. And VS Code is not the only appliance you can connect to it. You can shell directly into the machines. You can join in through IntelliJ and JetBrains products. So it's kind of broadly gone through it. So I come from a background of we do a little bit of Kubernetes microservices through Dapper. And so looking at wasmCloud, it came across my feed and it's something I'm interested in as a Rust programmer because I like Rust, and yeah, it seemed like a nice fit. So I said, what is something that's smaller than Dapper and certainly a little bit closer to Kubernetes agnostic, just pure WASM and Rust look like for a backend application? So I scoured through the docs, learned what I could, and decided, boy, this would be really good to have in a template if I ever wanted to spin up a backend with Gitpod really quick. I think that'd be some really good synergy that would allow people to see the application and work on it and experiment, right? And
That's
provide
awesome.
a good developer experience. So,
you have the ability to share your screen if you want to maybe do a demo.
That's what I'm going to do. So screen one here. All right, everybody see my screen?
Yep,
so
looks good.
I'm going to take this link. I'm going to pop this. I think, yeah, we've got it in Slack. We'll make sure it's there. So currently, this is a GitHub repo. It's a public template that anybody is free to access and go clone. And it's just got some kind of standard files. So just kind of real quick, I'm just going to walk you through the repo from the GitHub web editor view of this, right? And then we can walk through a couple files. So just a couple things that Gitpod kind of needs. It needs some rough ideas of how to bring up your dev environment, right? So for wasmCloud in particular, the docs indicated a great way to do that is a Docker Compose file. So what I did was I made a little wasmCloud base folder here and put a Docker Compose in there. And we started up all the relevant services to go along, right? So that's a standard Redis image if we want to test some key value work, a NAT server for the controlled message plane behind it, a local Docker registry if we have any signed artifacts that we want to go ahead and push locally and spin up scale of actors, right, beyond one actor. And in addition, finally, the wasmCloud host itself, the wasmCloud application. So yeah, so that's an important step. In the thread, I kind of walk through what the rest of these are, some things that it does. The big advantage really though is the pre-builds. This particular init step will actually go through the process of pulling all of the images in this Docker Compose. That can be a pretty expensive task locally. It can also be a pretty time-consuming task remotely too. So that init task allows your developer environment to be pre-built on Gitpod servers before you ever go to click into a workspace. And whenever you want to load a new workspace, you already have your images pulled, you're ready to go. And when you hit run, it happens as quick as possible. So starting from that, I'm going to go back here. And we're just going to go back to .com. So the standard experience would be to just open a Gitpod. You would click the link. I'm on a dev branch right now. And so I'm going to have to move that and doop. And we're just going to make this a little bit different. It'll probably yell at me and it says I've already got one, but we're going to pull a new workspace anyways. So one of the great parts about Gitpod is you can just pull as many workspaces, right? Up to 4 concurrently is up in the professional open source program. If you're an open source project and you're an open source organization, they've got a program you can apply to as well. You can join. They'll basically give you kind of an elevated license beyond, I think, the 100 hours of runtime anybody randomly off the web widget. So yeah, so this is pulling the container image that is the base for the developer workspace. This would be very similar to .dev container and VS Code. And what it's going to do is run through all of the tasks that are defined in the .gitpod.yaml. You're working while it's loading extensions. So you'll see the images are pulled, the dashboard is up for wasmCloud. And in this shell right here is actually the Docker Compose. We simply said, hey, I just want to, at start, run it, not in detached mode, just run it. Let's keep the logs up on the terminal screen so folks can see things. And yeah, we get a nice little preview browser editor window here with everything we need. If we want to spin open a new terminal, and we'll have a standard tool set available. So things like wash are available in this application. You've also got a Rust compiler in the application at the newest version. You'll have a Rust C, same thing, versioned. It's configured with Rust up. So if you Rust up version, you're running 1243. These are all configured at the root of the repository. So that's a Rust toolchain.toml file kind of at the root there. And that allows you to just configure what Rust do I want. So we can compile Rust. We've got the wash CLI, and we've got a wash dashboard with everything that we need to write an actor, right? So starting with that step, if we just kind of go do wash new actor hello, cool. We're gonna make our new hello dir here with all of our standard make files and boilerplate, and cd into that dir, and go ahead and say make. That'll trigger a build release of this particular project, which this is going to take a little while because Cargo is going to update a lot here, but it's a lot better than local dev and maybe a stricken cable connection that does not want to download very fast for you, or maybe you don't want to pay the big bucks to the Cox or the Verizon of the world to give you all the bandwidth. So yeah, this is running at, cloud data center speeds. So you're not going to get better network latency. Yeah, we'll let this build. And hopefully after I'm done with this, I will get the target path of our new actor that's signed and built with this makefile. Once that's done, I'll plug it into the dashboard here and say start actor. And that'll let us configure an actor with a specific capability. So here's our actor made. It's been signed with keys that are made by default because we did not have any at the root of our repository. So we're welcome to add those in a repo. You can throw that in an init step with a vault command to maybe go pull those from HashiCorp Vault, right? And at start, be able to pull your keys down for build for all your devs. And yeah, so we've got a successfully signed and built HelloS WASM. The make files have a command called target path ABS. And this is a directory in the container runtime of this particular instance that I'm on. And that is actually bind mounted to the wasmCloud host dashboard. So I'll show you real quick. We do have a hello actor. It's on hot reload, and it's referencing this particular path. So this path is here. It's actually in the system, but that path is also in the Docker Compose in a bind mount from the base root directory, which would be this, everything, this Gitpod Docker file, Gitpod YAML license, and README. And it's actually targeted to go into $dir. So like, what's $dir? $dir is up here at command.shell. It's PWD. So all we do is we just bind mount PWD in the full application into the container, and that allows us to get access to that hot reloaded WASM file. So we've got an actor. It's got capabilities, right? So in our case, it's got an HTTP server capability, so standard hello actor. So let's go start a provider. So we'll start one from registry, wasmCloud HTTP server. We'll use 1410, and we'll hit go. If we go back to the shell and we kind of want to see what's going on, we'll see that indeed the host that this dashboard runs picked up our ask to run that capability provider and told us its name, its instance, the various NAT configurations NATS configurations that it needs. And then we go through here, pick our actor, pick our provider, pick the link, wasmCloud HTTP server. address equal 8087. And so an interesting thing about this is a remote environment. This is someone else's container somewhere. So it could be a little weird to think about what ports are accessible. One of the ways to do that in Gitpod is this remote explorer window. So believe it or not, beyond opening this just to this application, there's options here to actually go ahead and make this public. So if I were to give you one of you a URL link and say 8087, you too could curl even from your own command line. So that's an option. But for today, I'm just going to go ahead and do it and say curl localhost on 8087. And you'll see we've got our hello world, right? If we do the same thing again, we can curl localhost. And this particular app is configured for taking the query string parameter and inserting it into it. And curl, get our name back. Hot reload. So hot reload, come into source lib. This isn't just the world. This is Gitpod. Make. And there we go. And I did all this without dirtying up my local environment. You didn't have to buy MacBook Pros for your entire team. You didn't have to go and ask someone, hey, I need you to learn this framework or how to perform these applications. This is remote dev environments, and this is the benefit of using them, right? Is everybody deserves the same tools or the tools that they want. If they want to come into this with Sea Lion and IntelliJ, they're welcome to connect to it over a remote connection, which is available. If they're a diehard Vim and terminal and Unix sysadmin guy, they can SSH in. There's a Gitpod local companion as well. So yeah, this is how you template a project. And yeah, this is what I made my Twitter thread for. Was I was just, hey, this is how to set up a remote dev experience for people who maybe aren't familiar with it and deal with some pretty complex projects, right? How do we get the boilerplate out? So yeah.
Evan, you absolutely crushed this demo.
Oh, cool. Great.
I mean, you didn't do a good job. You did an amazing job. And I just want to say thank you so much for not only the Twitter thread, but taking the time to come in and walk everybody through all the details that you really did there, like, you know, the hot reloading and taking all that friction out of the development process is incredible. If it's okay, what I would love for you to do is, would you do a pull request over to wasmCloud so that we can put this right on our project repo? I would cut and paste it, but it's yours. I want you to have, you know, and I'd love to just get you in. That would be phenomenally, it would be phenomenally awesome. I'd like to, Kevin, work with you to figure out what would the right, like, start developing in wasmCloud now button look like right on the webpage.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to transfer ownership of the template. I'll just ship the repo your way and kind of let you run with it from now on. I'm in touch with the Gitpod community stuff. So in my volunteer time, I'm part of the Gitpod Community Hero Program. That's a program that I joined about a week ago, and it gives me some elevated permissions and a little bit more ability to talk within the Gitpod organization about causes that are worthwhile and worth looking into. And so one of the things that I put in as well is they don't have an Elixir language Docker image or anything like that. So probably my next step is going to be to look at the wasmCloud host GitHub repo and actually ask, you know, what does it look like for you guys to stand up remote contributions to wasmCloud host with an Elixir and Rust stack as well. So yeah, and again, there are open source programs available. Yeah, how long do the hosts live? There's actually some great questions. I would love to answer those. There are runtime defaults depending on your user and license level for how long a workspace persists. It's a really great question. Obviously, there's things that persist for the life cycle of a Git repository. And then there's things that would persist, like I have local changes here of 8 files. How long would they last, right? So for my example, right, I currently have 3 workspaces spun up, and I could technically kill this one, I think. But I have changes in here from 2-3 days ago, 14, 12 days. I have a 13-day ago Django boilerplate app that I worked on that, yeah, it still has the original 7 changed files in the repository. I think that's on their standard tier that I think is like $9.99 a month. And then there's obviously enterprise pricing tiers and things. I think Gitpod.io probably /pricing would probably have any information you might need on capabilities and what comes with that, with this particular platform. But there's also great stuff in GitHub Codespaces too. And with with what's in even the beta React docs that have been done, right? There's a tremendous amount of work done with StackBlitz there that makes that experience pretty seamless. Angular as well. It's also another one that adopted StackBlitz as part of their dev docs. So yeah, lots of good improvements in the past year or two around dev experience and helping people get up to snuff with what's going on and spend less time provisioning local. Just stop. Like, it's just painful. Nobody needs all those MacBooks, man. We've got tons of cloud capacity. It can be run a lot greener than your local MacBook half the time with carbon credits. I mean, it's worth taking a look at if you're serious about dev experience within your company and within your teams.
Yeah, but now how are we going to justify our companies buying us MacBooks if we can,
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. It's a very valid point. Yeah, I've got a wife who loves a MacBook and will not use anything else, and I get it. I understand. It's there, but there are options.
Evan, I also wanted to welcome you to our community program. I think we just started it about 10 minutes ago, and you're the first member.
That's cool.
Includes free T-shirts and lots of stickers and things like that.
Yeah.
We'll get that. We'll get you an order form so you can get some swag shipped out to you and all those kind of things. But
very cool.
That was incredible. Are there any more questions for Evan?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I missed anything.
Evan, let me ask a question.
Yeah.
As a call to action, how could folks help on the team? Should we try it and give some feedback?
Oh yeah, please do. I have only gone through I've like the Hello actor, and I think maybe I've done the To Do actor, but I have not really tested KV Redis. I know there's a Postgres SQL DB capability provider. That'd be a great thing to test as well. Yeah, and there's really clever ways. There's you guys actually have, I'll share screen real quick, have a wonderful setup in terms of the examples repository. And I'll give a quick little tip if some people might not be aware of this, but if you're ever just like poking around repositories and you kind of want to like pull specific subdirs of a Git directory, maybe you think there's like a sparse checkout workflow, or you have to curl or use the GitHub API. Like I can make you aware of this. Like, you can take this Echo provider and you can actually convert this URL into an immediately gettable thing in the workspace. So SVN, right? Git's great, but SVN exists too. So one of the things you can do is you can actually say HTTPS github.com/wasmCloud/example/trunk actor/echo. And if I ls that, you'll notice it's actually got the contents of the repository nested within that subdir. You can change that ls to an export and give it a path of echo. And you will actually be able to grab the echo actor without having to clone echo, right? So in my case, I put echo and hello, but that's okay, right? So yeah, just a little quick tip if you guys are walking through examples, that might be a quick and convenient thing you can do that would make your life a little bit easier. Subversion's still good for some things. It's okay. Everybody has their own version control system. Git's not perfect, and it's always good to have tools.
All right, Evan, I think that's an official 2 mind blowns. My half, and then Brooks's 1.5 brains. Certainly, that's great. Any other questions? Any other questions for Evan? That was just phenomenal. All right,
I have a quick question, Liam, if you don't mind.
Cool.
Looking at that development environment as you cloned or you generated a new actor project. Mm-hmm. Can you take what you're doing with that Gitpod, from the template, and then, if I was working on an actor and I really like where it's going, can I fork that template and turn it
Oh,
into a repo on my, like under
absolutely.
my own user and then keep developing there, something like that?
Yeah, so I didn't show that workflow because I'm myself and I own the template. So that's probably a really good thing to talk about. If I don't own this template, the great way to do it is that Gitpod understands you're working within someone else's template repo when you would sign in through maybe a GitHub provider to Gitpod. And it would say, oh, you want to commit changes? Like, hold on, that's not your repo. You don't have commit privileges. So it actually has a little prompt that comes up in the bottom right and it says, hey, this is a template repository. Would you like to fork it? And it will fork it for you. And then you have a new repository that you can go and rename, and it offers those options for you. There's a workflow around that. I'd love to demo it, but I'm not myself, I guess. So I'd have to find a separate user to log in and test that workflow. But it has worked before. I've used it with other templates, and it allows you to start using a template. One example in particular, Simon at Redis University, his last name is escaping me, recently has come into our community and is building Flask Redis boilerplate for him to use as part of his workshops and education within Redis University. And he's encountering the same thing as well. He's got templates. He can send them to someone. Someone can make their own repos with Flask Redis boilerplate or Node Redis boilerplate. And they can be ready when they show up to a webinar to be able to code live and debug problems with solutions architects who are there on the call. So yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it can be easier. There's tools. That's the thing. We just, it's gotta spread.
Evan, I was able to, when you did your Twitter thread on Monday or Tuesday, I was actually able to get it up and running.
Cool.
So I think that if somebody in the background wants to, would you mind just dropping, Brooks, you dropped a link to the repo there and from the awesome wasmCloud list. If somebody wants to give it a try in the background, maybe someone else can demonstrate the fork button in just a second here if they try to make a change. If there are no more questions for Evan, or if Evan, if you're finished, I just want to say again,
yeah,
I'm just amazed balls. That was an awesome demo.
Yeah.
I don't know if you just did that off the cuff or if you rehearsed or whatever. That was
totally off the cuff.
That was great, man. You just knocked it out of the park.
And the Twitter thread was off the cuff too.
You're talking.
I had no idea. I didn't realize I was going to at wasmCloud. Then I joined your Slack channel and find you have a social media channel, and I was like, oh no.
No, it's all good, man. The whole team, everybody loved it. It was awesome. At first, it was like first comment somebody dropped in. They were like, "Hey, who's this guy?" And then you kept going throughout the day. It was awesome.
Okay, good.
But welcome anytime as a member of our community program. Of course, you're welcome anytime. We'll get you one of the keys for Kevin's library room next, for his little back room. I think Brooks, you're up next with community. Let me ask: are there any more demos or demonstrations today? I'm not sure, Matt, how your stuff's coming along.
I actually, what I ended up doing last week is I created my own interface for the DynamoDB KV-ish provider, I guess I would call it. So maybe if we have time at the end, we can talk about the discussion that has gone on with respect to versioning interfaces and, extending interfaces and all that, but maybe, like save it for the end if we have extra time. If that makes sense.
That's great. Are there any other demos? So before we transition over to community callout today? Okay, Brooks, I think you're up. If you want to maybe get started on community callouts.
Yeah, let's do it. Look at that, sharing permissions. Okay, so this is our biggest community call out yet, which I'm excited to bring you today. We have 4 community callouts. 2 of them are in the host and 2 of them are in Wash, but we'll get into them really quick. So these are all great places to get started for contributing. This first one, we noticed the Slack user VYK, I believe, found a little bit of a bug in our dashboard where if you are putting in base64 encoded config, which is something that we commonly do for link definitions between actors and providers, when the values kind of exceed 3 or 4 link definition values, you can do a base64 encoded config. So it's just one easy value, one string. And the logic for parsing link definition values is a little more naive. It was designed before we started supporting this config base64. So what we do is we split by an equal sign, take the left and right side, and it's like the link definition key and value. But commonly base64 encoded stuff has equal signs either at the end or maybe in the middle. So what we'd like to do, this is a bug for now. What we'd love for somebody to, a contributor or one of us to do is take a look at this and handle trailing equal signs so that we can support base64 encoded config. So I pointed out where this is happening in the dashboard. So this should be this is a great place to get started if you wanted to take a look at, just kind of changing our algorithm a little bit here. The next one is also in the OTP host. So each link definition that you make between an actor and a provider essentially involves 5 different things. It's an actor ID, a provider ID, a contract ID, a link name, which is something that you can use to run multiple different instances of the same provider, and then all of the values, like what we were talking about in the last thing. But what we found is that each actor can only really have one link definition for a contract ID and a link name. When you're writing your WebAssembly actors or wasmCloud actors, you don't know what provider is going to be fulfilling a capability at runtime. You only have a concept of a contract ID and a link name. So that's how we're representing the data in the host. But what we found is if you publish a link definition for the same actor or contract ID and link name, but different providers, you can actually end up overwriting that link definition that was already there, but the capability provider will essentially ignore it because it's seen as like a duplicate. So what we'd really like is when we put a link definition, and again, here I've linked to the point in the code, we should reject that. So when you try to do wash control link put, or you're in the dashboard and you define a link definition, we should reject this essentially duplicate link definition and say, hey, you should probably be deleting this link definition and redefining it instead. And this will just overall lead to less confusing use cases. It can certainly still continue to work with this, but it can cause confusion depending on how you're scripting or how your development environment is set up, things like that. Now on to wash. I just kind of made up this prefix here. It's kind of a request, but with wash context, what we do is by default, whenever you start a wasmCloud host on your machine, wash uses what we call a context to take the configuration we used to launch the host and automatically connect to that host's lattice. And so the net result of this is that anytime you launch a host and then immediately go to use wash to try and get the list of hosts or start an actor or something, you automatically use that host config context to connect to that host. So by default, super easy to interface with a host locally. You don't need to provide a bunch of different parameters, especially if you have things like authenticated NATs. But what this issue here specifically is talking about is you can deserialize that host config JSON incorrectly, depending on if a value in there is incorrect or what happened. I think it was that the host wrote out a null value or a non-default value and wash didn't deserialize it properly, something like that. In general, we take these errors and fail silently because a wash context isn't required for interacting with a host. But what we'd like to do is at least have a debug log. If we fail to deserialize this wash context, we want to be able to know without having to explicitly clone wash locally and rebuild it or something like that. So I've kind of pointed out one place where this could happen. We should have a debug log here so that users can tell if their host config is in the wrong format or something like that. All right, and the last one, which is something that actually kind of bit us as Cosmonic devs the other day. And so of course we immediately wanted to improve this, this experience. When you do things like put a link definition or you start a capability provider, the link name flag is optional. And this is because when you start a provider, you put a link definition for a specific provider, we use default as the default value. And this covers like I wrote in here the 80%, but in my opinion, it covers pretty much the 90% use case of developing with wasmCloud. You have no need to run anything on a link name other than default unless you have multiple of the same provider, which is more of an advanced use case, which we are hitting the more and more we develop with wasmCloud. And what I would like ideally is when you type in wash control link put and you want to look at what options you need. We show that you need actor ID, provider ID, and contract ID. And this isn't misleading. These are the things that you actually need to have. But what I'd like to see here is include the link name option as something that the default like failure output shows you. And the reason for this is so that you don't forget about it. If you do wash control link put, -- help or something like that, it'll show the link name. But it's really useful to remember that this is an option that we accept for this command. And this feels like something that Clap probably has an option to show an option. Man, too many options. It has an option to show a flag, even if it is optional. And that would be the desired experience there. All right, so that was a lot of talking, but that is our community call out. 4 issues, 2 on the host, 2 on wash. Does anybody have any questions about these community call outs while we're still here?
And just a quick reminder, like if people want to go and find these after this, they just need to go to the appropriate repo and look for the good first issue tag on these issues.
Yeah, great call. Yeah, we tag all of these with good first issue, so they're easy to find. And I will also make sure to post all of these in Slack so that you don't have to search or remember or wait for the YouTube video or anything. And we'll also get them tweeted out so that they're easy to find as well.
Well, thank you, Brooks. Some awesome call outs for today and lots of great ways to get started helping to build the kind of community I know we're all proud to be a part of. So a couple of just other community items to mention today. I'm going to share my screen here. QCon is in London on Wednesday, April the 6th. Just as a call out here, there is some great WebAssembly content on the schedule. We also are incredibly close. We hope to finish reviewing submissions for WASM Day for KubeCon in Valencia the week of May 15th. We hope to finish that on Thursday and start releasing acceptances at the end of this week. And we're also working on a set of training for that particular conference. So expect some training options as well this year. If you don't have your tickets yet, all of the online virtual tickets do include a WASM Day ticket this year. So last year we were the top rated Kubernetes day. We had a 4.5 out of 5 stars on our rating and over 300 attendees, and we got the Gold DNI award. So Ralph, Matt Butcher, and I are all working very hard to ensure that we continue to build a big and diverse community. Not diversive, inclusive community. Diverse is what I meant to say, kind of stumbled there. So at this point, maybe if we want to turn Matt to any roadmap discussions or any work in flight discussions. Steve, I think that folks are really interested in the wasmCloud ML stuff. I don't know if you feel like prepared to just maybe speak to it today or not. Just open floor for anything folks want to bring up.
On the ML front, there is a community call tomorrow. Liam, you could, I think you've pasted the link. And so I don't have updates right now. It's work in progress.
Okay, those meetings do end up on YouTube. So folks can't make the Thursday at 3 o'clock slot. Those do show up there so you can get caught up and up to speed. In channel, there's also a link in general if you want to check for the repos linked right there. I shared from the wasmCloud ML channel out. I will paste the link for tomorrow's meeting into our Slack channel now, into the comments here as well. Steve, thank you. And I know that we got a lot of folks that are excited about playing with that, and so maybe we'll get a demo on the schedule here over the next couple weeks. Matt, did you want to maybe turn to what you were working on?
Yeah, I mean, so I was just working on, for the KV DynamoDB provider, what I ended up doing because I needed to anyway was I've been doing that initially as a branch on the official capability providers repo, but I created my own capability provider since I think the thought is that that would be like a third-party provider. And just for the sake of getting to a demo faster, I created my own contract for that provider. An issue came up on the interfaces repo that probably surfaces two discussions, which I don't know if it's worth having here. One is on versions of interfaces, which I think is like a probably really large discussion that perhaps warrants its own even meeting amongst those that care. And then the other one was just kind of going back and forth about the idea of any interface that may require some sort of paging, and how to or to not support that. One thing that came to mind for me the other day was that like in any SQL-like provider, a user may also want to be able to page through, however many records coming back from a query. So is there a standard like structure that we may want to use for that? Or, I know Kevin specifically has raised some reservations about supporting it at all. So I don't know if now's the time to chat about it.
Kevin, would it make sense to maybe share your perspective on this? Or Steve, it looks like you came off mute maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna see if Kevin wanted to chime in. I have some thoughts.
Sorry, but apparently I didn't click unmute hard enough. Yeah, I think, like you said, the discussion about versioning is probably a big discussion, and having a separate meeting about that, I think, probably makes sense. The other stuff with regard to paging and cursors and things like that, it's not that I'm opposed to supporting it. It's just that there are a lot of subtle ways for an actor to get in trouble by doing something like using a paged cursor. And the one edge case that comes to mind is where if you have an actor that's doing a paged pull from a provider, and it takes that actor longer than 2 seconds to finish pulling, and in which case that causes an RPC timeout, and then timeouts then bubble backwards from there, and you end up with what in Go looks like a chain of deadline exceeded failures. And so we would end up with similar situations. So it's more, my reservation there isn't really a technical one. It's more, how do we make it so people don't fall into that trap of, looping through cursor pulls and mistakenly assuming that they have an infinite amount of time to do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think on the one hand, figuring all of this out, we don't want to make it a bottleneck that prevents you from getting the DynamoDB working. AWS in their Smithy, when they use Smithy to generate interfaces, they have developed some standards for pagination. And so it's a similar design pattern they use for hundreds of different APIs. You're right, there are a lot of interfaces that might require that. And this is separate from whether or not scanning should be added to key value or a different interface. And we do want to figure out what pattern makes sense for wasmCloud to avoid the timeouts like Kevin mentioned, and whether there should be an option for subscription callbacks, or whether it should be required to have the callbacks, or so all that will take some time to figure out. So in the absence of that, making a custom interface might be your only option for now until we are able to dive into a couple of these other conversations.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So I just kind of went ahead and did that and figured maybe we table some of this discussion for kind of a larger design. Go ahead, Brooks.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So I know that you said that you were, working off a custom interface. Is it almost entirely the same as the key value, just with that scan operation that you added?
Exactly. In fact, I was going to ask, and perhaps this is asked and answered elsewhere, if you can have a provider that implements multiple interfaces. So like I could implement KV and then have like custom part of KV that just exposes a couple extra operations that I would implement.
So that's, yeah, technically it's not supported. There's a almost like a cheat code you can use where you could, in theory, if you have a capability provider that you want to support multiple different contracts, you could, in theory, instantiate it or start it multiple different times. And each time you start it, you could start it with a different contract ID.
I understand.
But that doesn't work out of the box with any of our tooling. Like when you look at the manifest stuff that we put in the PAR files, those have one contract. Offhand, I don't really know for sure which pieces of the plumbing may or may not fail if you were to run something like that. So I would say that, for all intents and purposes, it's not really supported today.
Yeah, and in my specific use case for now, I'm really wanting a very small subset of the KV interface plus one extra operation. So that probably just makes sense to have a custom interface.
Yeah, I think it does bring up another interesting point, and I think you and I may have had a conversation in Slack about this, where one of the things that I'd love to hear some input on from the community is on the idea of being able to indicate some way which are the supported operations by a given provider. And so then you might be able, this runs down a potentially slippery slope, because if you can identify which operations are supported, then you're now getting closer towards the tight coupling that we want to avoid entirely. And the other thing would be that the actors can't really know whether it's supported or not, so they're going to get an error message anyway. So yeah, there's a lot of
I think we did talk about it in Slack, and we just ended on the convention of throwing the RPC. I believe there's an RPC error not implemented enum variant. I don't know if it would be useful to have a specific enum variant for like anything other than that, but perhaps it's just something that you handle by convention, and then ultimately actors are expected to see that if they get a particular error, like, oh, this provider doesn't support that operation.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the thing I was most curious about is if you needed a ton of different custom things. The cool thing, I think, is that if it's just the scan operation and we can reach, we'll want to have the versioning discussion, but if we can reach a point where we do integrate something similar to that, or something that on the Dynamo provider side, you can implement the scan functionality that you want, and then on the Redis side, we could do something different, then it should be a pretty painless switch for you to go from custom interface that it's just a small superset of the key value, just to switch to the wasmCloud official, which is cool.
Yeah, it comes down to there's like the short-term solution for how we take care of the scan operation, and I think like Brooke said, there's probably a pretty provider agnostic way we can define that interface so that, you know, both Redis and Dynamo can implement this their own internal ways without exposing the details. And so that'd be the short term. But then there are larger, more philosophical discussions to be had about, you know, things like subsets of contracts and how do we deal with that sort of thing, as well as contract versioning.
Cool. Well, I mean, I'm unblocked, so, you know, but I'm happy to continue, even if I'm just a fly on the wall, participating in these conversations because they're super interesting. On the other side note, Steve, I may ping you about, I was curious if I wrote a more robust Dynamo provider to reuse some of the Smithy interfaces that AWS uses themselves. Imagine if you broke free of KV and you just wanted a straight up DynamoDB provider that was feature complete, so to speak, with the AWS API. You know, how would you do that? But that's yet another can of worms. I'll hit you up on that separately.
Sure, let's follow up offline. And we definitely want to have you be part of the discussions on how we think about API versioning. And
sure.
So great.
Okay, phenomenal discussion, by the way. And you know, do we need to capture any tasks on you know, our GitHub to sort of like have a placeholder to have those discussions? Or, you know, Kevin, I feel like some of those are going to ultimately end up as ADRs, architectural decision records. Is there any way you want to track that stuff on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think whether we use another community meeting for some of that discussion or whether we set up another call, I think it's probably worth just sort of chewing over some of the options around contract versioning and contract subsets. But yeah, we could also potentially treat those like RFCs and, you know, open up some GitHub issues for commentary.
Yeah, that I feel that feels like a good approach to me, only because I know that we've got a lot of really wicked smart people here on not only on this call, but folks that, you know, like Matt's and you know, some of the folks that are really regular on Slack, but are in a different time zone. So I think it would be really important that we include their perspective and give them a chance to put their fingerprints on the gun before we pull the trigger on any of these things. That way everybody feels like, hey, this is my gun. You know, this is my murder. I mean, my RFC.
It's a pretty dark analogy, but yeah, we can go with that for now.
Hey man, just try to bring a little fun to architectural decision records. I'm open for suggestions as usual. Never make anybody bad. Great. Any other topics roundtable we want to you know, we want to touch base on? Jeff, I would ask. I know that we've touched base a bit on the importance of Bindle and some of the, you know, community stuff coming down. Are you plugged in over at the Bytecode Alliance with the stuff that's going on there? Or do you have any other concerns that are, you know, top of mind for you this week?
Not exactly plugged in with what's going on that. So you can send me a brief note on what's going on there. I'd really appreciate it.
Taylor, I know you're nominally our rep over there on that particular note. I don't know if there's anything to share now. Maybe we just pick it up next week and just give folks an update.
I mean, I'm not nominally, I am the representative, but sorry, Liam, I had to give you.
No, you are.
But so I honestly don't know exactly. I mean, this is human politicking at the best. I mean, it's spec writing amongst a group. So we're just trying to decide what we want to talk about right now, really. So it'll take a little bit, but this is normal. That's not a complaint. That's how these things work. So there's not like tons to report there, but we are having conversations. Those registry meetings, actually, I have to go to one here in just a second. They're not, I think there's like, this is just like the SIG member meeting. I think once we get things solidified, it'll become more of like a public meeting everyone can join into kind of thing. I'm still getting into it, so I don't have all the details.
Okay, that's still a very helpful context. Thank you very much for sharing.
Jeff, I know that privately we've touched base a little bit, and Taylor has been doing a ton of thinking inside of Cosmonic about what we can do, and we think we are going to have some fun open source stuff later as we kind of get into this. So we'll keep you in the loop and maybe even see about pulling you into a design process or giving us some early feedback on stuff as we pull our plans together. I want to make sure that we include some of the use cases that you've indicated are important to you, and make sure that this is something that you'd look at and at least consider as you plan your path forward over the next few years.
Yep, sounds good.
Awesome. Anyone else? I think it's been a phenomenal meeting today, but last call for issues today. All right. Well, as usual, I'll go ahead and stop the meeting here, and we can hang out and just close the meeting down. Thank you so much for coming to wasmCloud Wednesday this week. Have a great day.